everyone could stand up and make sure you have some Post-its. There should be Post-its in the box on your table. So we're all familiar, right, with how it goes when you're meeting someone out in public. You don't know them, maybe you're standing at the bus stop or whatever, and you say, "Oh, how are you doing?" Right? And what's the most common response? Fine, right? So I do it too. We're interested this morning in having a little exercise called How Are You Doing Really? So to get ready to have a little bit of a deeper conversation, you're gonna take your Post-its and just think about some stuff that's top of mind. It could be personal, it could be professional, it should be something you'd be willing to share. And put one thing on a Post-it, and then stick it on your person. So just take like 2 minutes. Pardon? Yeah, so you wanna have at least 3, 4, 5 things, just one per Post-it, and then stick them on your person. So just take a second to do that.
And say, this is the parts. I'm going to give you chapter 1. And then when I'm done, I'll give it to you. So my recommendation is focus on chapter 1. From that, and then you can get some ideas from your single plan. Like, how did you do data analysis, right?
So that was just a warm-up to remind us of human values and the ways we can express them by sharing a little bit more of ourselves. That is going to be really germane because we're going to get going now on a challenge. We're going to have a full cycle experience using the design thinking process in the next 82 minutes. Okay? For some of you that like a ton of context before you try something, this may feel a bit uncomfortable. So I just want you to acknowledge that. We can all acknowledge that. But we're going to go through the 80 minutes. Have this experience of design thinking, and then use that to reflect on what are the elements of this process, how did you access the different mindsets, etc. Okay? So from here on out, we're just jamming on a challenge. We are working together on a challenge. Let's get a little drum roll, please. On designing a new city experience. Hopefully this is not something you guys do every day in your day jobs. You guys do tons of great things in your work, but this is not one that's purposely chosen to work on something that none of us is actively engaged in precisely. And we're going to dig into the process. Okay? There are worksheets on your table that you're going to use. You are designing for a partner today. Okay? You're designing for your partner. You are not designing for yourself. The fundamental thing about design thinking is that we work this empathy muscle to design based on inspiration from the world, not to design for ourselves. So you're going to work with your partner to design a new city experience based on them and their experience. Okay? So we're going to dig in. Katie and I are going to model for you what it can look like. The first move that you're going to make is to have a good conversation with your partner. Okay? The idea is, you can flip to the first page if you want, hear a good story. So what is empathy really about? The simplest way we like to think about it is just to get a good story. Because once you're in a good and specific story, you're going to have insight. You're going to be able to start to pull out some insight about human needs. All right? So your first job is going to be to interview your partner about an experience they've had going to a new city. You want to get super specific. It's not what is it like in general when you go to a new city. And we already know we've got a lot of travelers in this group. So Clarence might, right, his partner might ask him about what was it like the first time he went to Barcelona, for instance. Doesn't have to, but could be. You want to get super specific. Doesn't have to be about international travel. Could be the first time you went to Stockton. What was it like? Okay? All right, so super agnostic as to what kind of city, but you're starting to think, how am I going to ask my partner about their experiences with city? How am I going to get to a good story? All right? And all you need really is like one good story. So Katie and I are going to model it. I'm going to be the interviewer. She's the interviewee. All right? So Katie, I was really curious if you could share with me a particular time when you got to a new city and what was it like for you to explore it?
Yeah. So I think one of the most memorable times was when I visited St. Louis.
Oh, and stop right now. I'm doing a terrible job modeling this because I want you to take some notes. Right? So I will be using my paper to take some notes. All right. So, sorry about that, false start. Tell me about that first time you went to St. Louis.
Yeah. So I was 19, and my best friend from high school, I was spending the summer with her in actually Tennessee, but she was moving to St. Louis, and she had to do some paperwork at her university to make the transfer happen. So I drove with her there, but I didn't really have the same business, so I kind of had the day to explore. And
so I just want to interrupt there and say, like, what made you want to go to St. Louis with her?
I think I really wanted to have an adventure, and I really love getting the chance to explore kind of on my own. So that was appealing too, to be able to kind of be cut free and take on the city.
Okay, wow, interesting, super interesting. So what happened when you got there?
Yeah, so I wasn't prepared. I had no real idea, but I had a notion that I wanted to. I had a life goal of trying to visit all the Major League Baseball parks. So I thought I'll start by going to a game at the stadium there, St. Louis Cardinals game. So I figured out that you can get like day of, standing room only tickets for really cheap, and I did that, and I kind of walked around.
Can I pause you just for a second too? Super interesting. So you decide to go to St. Louis, you want to go to this ballpark, and you find out about tickets. Like, what made you pursue that, or why was that of interest? I mean, I know you have this goal for going to the baseball parks, but like going alone to a baseball game, standing room only. What was that like? What were the feelings there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wanted to have an anchor, like someplace to start, and I had this interest, and so that was like a way in. But it wasn't the only thing I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure yet what the rest of the time was going to be like. And it's okay to be alone. Most people don't go alone to a ball game, but you can kind of be like in your own head and space.
And that's what was it like? What happened?
Yeah, so I kind of wandered around. I mean, standing room only is like not very clear what you're supposed to do. And I walked around for a while, and then I kind of scoped out this section of seating that was totally empty. And I was like, all right, I think they're probably not going to show up, so I'm going to sit down. And I sat there for a while, and then sure enough, this group of ladies showed up. And I was like, oh no, it was awkward. And they came over and they said, our husbands didn't want to come with us today, so you could you join with us. Like, you don't have to move. Like, sit here and we'll hang out.
How did that feel?
At first I was like, oh no, I'm in their seats, like super awkward. But they were so warm and embraced me and were so funny and kind of that I was like, all right, well, let's roll with this. And I sat with them for the rest of the game, and it felt really great.
Did it stay awkward the whole time? Or
no, I mean, I think I'm like I can kind of present as outgoing, but I'm actually pretty introverted, and I was definitely in the space that day of like, I'm alone in St. Louis. And so I wasn't really expecting to have this like social experience, but they were so, like, they didn't give me a chance to be awkward. They just scooped me up, and that just brought down my barrier. But I think also being at the ball game like allowed me to kind of like, we're just watching the game, now we're gonna talk, and watching the game. So like there's a way for me to like kind of have entry.
All right, we're gonna go end scene here. I think you're getting the idea, right? Even just from asking that question about a city that she's been to, we're digging into a lot there. Like, what is it like to be alone? What is it like to meet others? I'm super curious to follow up about what this feeling was. I'm not gonna follow up right now because I want you guys to get started on yours, but she said she felt like she was scooped up by these folks. I think that's really interesting, and this juxtaposition between like being alone but also being willing to do that. So I'm already super intrigued just by starting to talk about St. Louis, okay? So now it is your turn. I want to give you just a couple minutes, take 2 minutes, and think about how you might want to start your conversation with your partner, okay? And then so I'm just going to give you a couple minutes for that, and then when I tell you, you're going to start your partner, and then I'll tell you when to shift. So everybody on their own, just a couple minutes on what are the kind of questions you might want to ask to start the conversation. figure out in your partnership who's partner A and who's partner B. And partner A, go ahead and start your interview. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to have an initial conversation with your partner, and then I'll tell you when to switch. So go ahead and start your interview. Ask your partner about a city experience they've had.
Okay.
Go ahead and switch, and other partner interview for the city experience of your partner. So partner B, whoever was just interviewed, now you're interviewing the other partner.
It was a bit much for me.
Time out for a second. Time out for a second. Anybody find out something interesting in just a 4-minute? Right? Amazing how much you can find out in 4 minutes when you just ask a question that's kind of out of the blue. So really interesting. I'm going to give you a little bit more time to dig deeper, as we call it. This is a little bit if you have like the secret side of you that kind of wants to be a shrink. You can kind of get into the why and dig deeper here. Katie and I will model it again so you remember where we were. So we're in St. Louis. I'm talking to Katie about St. Louis. So Katie, so we're in St. Louis, super interesting, and you were just telling me about how you were planning to watch the game on your own, you're kind of into the adventure of like being on your own, but then this group scooped you up, and I'm so curious, like, what that felt like, and also why maybe you felt like you could do that, and kind of go there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was really about their energy. I mean, they just like came and sat down and were like, "You're one of us," and like, I just didn't even have a chance to decide. It just was. And they kind of took me under their wing, and again, like the ball game facilitated like not a ton of intensity, like right up front, but we chatted the whole game basically, and then at some point it occurred to me like these are locals, like I should ask them like what should I do? And they told me a bunch of things, but they said the one thing you have to do, and you have to figure out a way to get there because it's not in downtown, is Ted Drew's frozen custard. You have to go there. That's the St. Louis thing. And so I did my thing. The game finished. I did my thing for the rest of the day, and I was actually able to go back to my friend's house. Her parents had actually relocated to St. Louis, and she was changing colleges to come with them. And told her and her dad, like, hey, like, I think we need to figure out how to do this Ted Drews thing. It's funny, it was not before smartphones, so I don't know how we figured out where it was, but we did. And we drove out there, and then I was able to pass along this local knowledge to my friend and her family who really mean a lot to me, and they were transitioning, and they were able to have this very authentic experience, and it felt really great.
So why did it feel great?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I had a really strong value as a young person and still today to find the like authentic things, like the real things with heart and that mean something to people. And out of this like serendipitous thing that I was totally not expecting or even really up for, I got to this insight about the place and was then able to share that with people that really mattered to me.
Super interesting. Love this notion that you were interested, that like it felt serendipitous and that was somehow important to you. Why do you think that is? What do you get from something that's serendipitous?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the opportunity for something to unfold based on putting myself out there is a really big deal. And like, I think when those things happen, they feel really like awesome. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. I just like, in my person, I feel alive and energized by those moments because I couldn't create them. It just happened.
Awesome. Okay, great. We'll call end scene on that one. So this is your opportunity. There's probably something that you heard in your first conversation with your partner that you want to follow up on. So think for just a second, what do you want to follow up on? And go ahead and restart a conversation. You have 3 minutes for this kind of dig deeper piece. Remember to use this, and if you notice there are a couple times in there where I just paused and said, well, why's that, right? Why do you think you like that? Why did you get swept up? Try to use why a few times and see where it gets you. You want to try and get to some of the underlying feelings of the experience that your partner's sharing with you. So you have 3 minutes. We'll tell you when to switch. Go a little deeper.
How did your sister end up in
Hey everybody. Great. So I'm glad you had such rich conversations. Now, as we move from this empathy mode into our define mode, we ask ourselves the question, not what's a good story, but what does it mean? What does it mean? So if you turn to the next page on your worksheet, number 3, imagine the meaning. You see the half page, imagine the meaning. You're going to create a statement that captures some of what you heard, but takes this very important leap to what does it really mean to you? Okay? So just as an example, since Katie and I have been modeling, and this you do on your own. You don't do this as a check-in with your partner. You do it on your own. Yes, Kendall, hide your work. So you're going to imagine the meeting. So I wanted to share with you what I took, and you saw the interview that, right, the 2 interviews that we just did with Katie. What I took was, it's interesting, it's surprising that Katie was planning to be on her own, but yet let herself be scooped up by locals. Okay? One thing that seems important to her is to put herself out there, that was another one of her quotes, to let things unfold. And I wonder if this means, and here's where you really, like I'm taking a leap, I'm not checking in with Katie about this, I'm just saying, I wonder if this means, and you can get a couple, that setting out on your own allows you to be open to unexpected connections. Or I wonder if this means you can be alive in a new city in a way you can't in your own life. Or I wonder if this means that Katie needs a way to generate serendipity. Okay, so those are my wonderings from my interviews that you saw. You're going to take 3 minutes now, just on your own, and check out what you can come up with. Again, just feel free to make this kind of inferential leap of what might this mean. Okay? Okay, so you're going to move on from there. We've got a little bit of a stab at the meaning. Go ahead and flip to the other side, creating a brainstorming topic. We're going to move into ideation now. And one of the things that we want to do is kind of set the stage for brainstorming. We're going to brainstorm in a group. That's why our tables are 4. But your job, since you're the one that did, you're the only one who did the interview that you did, is to frame up kind of a topic for brainstorming. And here we do it in 2 parts. One is just to think about a context in a city, because remember we are still on designing a new city experience. Pick one of these contexts. In particular, pick one that maybe isn't so related to some of the things you heard, because that's going to lead you in a weirder direction, which is going to generate new ideas. And then you're going to use that context and plop it right into this how might we statement. How might we statements are, as you get to know us, we always use how might we statements. They're this very positive, generative, design-oriented kind of phrasing. Just gets everybody ready to come up with ideas. So in the example that I've been working on, my statement is, how might a transit system, so that's the context I picked, so I didn't pick the baseball park, right, because that was what we were talking about. How might a transit system take advantage of generating serendipity? So I just pulled from one of my I wonder if statements and modified it to work here. So how might a transit system take advantage of generating serendipity? That's going to be my launching off point for brainstorming. Not yet, but so just take a couple minutes to create that statement. It's just a little Mad Libby and it'll help us move into ideation. Cool, all right, sounds like everyone's got it down. Again, we're just gonna model this, then how do we use the statement that we just created to start to do brainstorm? So you can turn to the next page. We're gonna do this in groups of 4 because that helps us build the energy. So Tony and Bruce are gonna join Katie and I right up here. And we're gonna brainstorm. And so my job to introduce my team of 4 now, this is what your job is gonna be. I'm just going to share the teeniest sliver, just kind of headline that conversation that I had. Nobody else, in the case of Katie, right, you all saw it. But when you're a foursome, right, nobody else is in the conversation. So I'm just going to headline kind of what I learned from that and what my statement is. Okay, so guys, here's the deal. We are, so I interviewed and I was super interested in how Katie, she was planning to be alone, but she ended up getting into this whole group of locals, and she loved that. It kind of pushed her into an interesting space, and she loved actually taking up the serendipity. So our starting off point is, how might a transit system take advantage of generating serendipity? I have no idea what we're going to get from that whole transit system thing, but let's just think about that. How might a transit system take advantage of generating serendipity? So everybody needs a little bit of a Post-it on our team, and we're just going to add it to the paper. We're all just thinking of ideas about what we might do. How might a transit system take advantage of generating serendipity?
So what if seats are paired so that you automatically meet someone and start a conversation?
Cool. Okay, so we just jump in and keep adding ideas. What if when you got off at the wrong station, there was an oopsie button and you could tell you something cool that you could do in that station? It's the oopsie button.
What if trains stopped at unlikely places? They don't usually stop. The backyards of people or something.
Generating serendipity. Yeah, Bruce?
Well, I was going to say, what if there was a discount for people who could say, these are 3 people I've met, you're waiting, and now we get a special discount.
What if there was a random bus? You just got on and you
Okay, we're gonna end scene there. So a couple things. What's that? couple things to notice there. We were playing with the topic, but we weren't overly married to it, so we let it move in a couple of directions. We also built on the ideas of others. So we picked up this random backyard stops, and then we got the random bus, right? The really important thing about generating ideas is totally separate from deciding which one to work on. So we don't care if it's possible, we don't care if it costs $1 million, we don't have any of those concerns right now. We're just generating ideas, in this case, of how to intersect transit system and generating serendipity.
And it's super key to quiet your inner critic and also be super supportive of your team. So that at this stage there are no bad or wrong or dumb ideas. Just get them out there because they'll inspire new things.
Okay, so this is how we're going to work it. At your table, there are 4 of you. We're going to do 4 rounds of this. We want one person to self-identify. I'm willing to go first. You're going to flip to the other page. You want everybody to have some Post-its and a Sharpie. And you want to share just a little bit of the stories that you heard. And then read that statement and start generating ideas.
How might a neighborhood park take advantage of music and comfort?
I'd like you to try for this round actually doing it standing up. We tend to find the variation, you can get your energy up a little bit. So you figure out how you stand around a person. And again, you get their story, and then the how might be statement, you start generating ideas for your second participant.
All right.
And go. As you're coming up good idea is to push yourself to be visual. See if you can sketch the idea that you're coming up with. You find that sketching, right, and getting visual, even if it's just a little part of it, stick figures, it doesn't matter. Adding that sketch will move your brain in a different way and might get you to some new ideas. Okay, so round 3, share, sketch. Yep, sketch, stay standing, and that concludes round 3. You should have one more round to go. Yes, at your table. Super. So what I'd like you to do before you start this next round, and you can sketch or write on this next round, I would encourage you to stay standing, but we really want to push you on going for quantity. Okay, one of the aspects of brainstorming that you want to do is your first ideas don't tend to be your best. If you push beyond that by getting to quantity, you may get to another place. So go ahead and your team count up which one you have the most ideas, and your goal is to double it. Double your number of ideas for this 4th round of brainstorming. Okay? So friends, you have, your teams have just given you this incredible gift of a whole bunch of ideas on the challenge that you created. Right? You created that challenge and then your team built on it and gave you a bunch of ideas. Now we're going to shift modes from team level to back on your own. Take that full set of ideas. Think about one that's really interesting to you. Stay in this generative ideation mind. So you're still not criticizing it and figuring out how much it costs or what's wrong with it. Stay generative, but play it out a little bit more. Take one of the ideas and just think about how could it really work, right? Who's really going to use it? What does it look like? Just take it a step further. Doesn't matter if it's like, if it moves away from that initial question, that's really great. Just take it somewhere, sketch it out how it's going to work on your own. You've got, 3 minutes to do that. You've got to build it. Now it's time to build it. We've brought out some basic craft materials, some dress-up materials. Whatever your idea is at this point, try to figure out some way to build it. If it's only a piece of it, that's okay. Build it so your partner can try it out. Okay? Build a piece of it so that they get an idea of what you're thinking about. Right? I see some puzzled looks, so we'll circulate the room, but we want you to stand up and think about moving beyond the sketch.
As a group, right?
No, individually. Yeah, it's the project, right? The whole team helped you brainstorm, but then you just picked one of those ideas and sketched it out a little bit more, and now it's your job to build it, because your partner is going to test it for you in the very near future. So you got 7 minutes to build. 7 minutes to build.
We must build. If you build it,
And now you have this, like, probably very far from your conversation interpretation, but it's manifest. So you can put it in your partner's hands, explain it to them a little bit, and find out what they think, right? So love for you to share it with your partner. We'll give you 4 minutes each. I'll tell you when to trade. And make a few notes if you can on kind of what worked, what didn't, what new questions have arisen, and maybe even what new ideas have come up. Because again, the whole purpose of the prototype is to generate that next level of really rich conversation. So you have 4 minutes for one partner to show the other and get that feedback, and then we'll tell you when to switch. You're nearly done with an entire design cycle. Okay.
So I'm thinking circle the room, and I'm thinking about the impact.
What is working, what is I made it. I can't believe it.
Do a loose kind of circle around the room, so people can kind of, we're just going to loosely circle the room. Before we talk process though, I'd like to hear about, does anybody have something that was created for them as a prototype that they'd like to share, kind of to brag on the designer that worked with them? Anyone want to brag on your designer?
Right.
Alfonso, he created an open mic night for native and tourists. Actually, it's a chain, an international bar that would host a series of open mic events during happy hour so that natives can learn more about the city or can share about what they know about the city, and tourists can learn about the hole in the walls that Katie was talking about.
Well, my partner created a world school for me. Not just a traditional school, but a school where students would come to from all over the world, and our students would go out, but we would really focus on community issues or issues that affect different societies. And the education would be based in, like I said, like education is an issue in Ethiopia, so taking students to Ethiopia, building schools, and really getting into like the world geography aspect.
My designer was really insightful, first of all, in really understanding what I'm about in a very short time. And she created a tourism experience where it's a whole year experience. You start out with a survey, and she even has the survey instrument, and you end up with a whole calendar of events that sort of precede what you're going to do, and it's all based on what your passions are, and she groups you with other people who have those passions. And she did that astoundingly. Cynthia.
So mine was limited to not traveling ever by myself. This is the first time I checked myself into a hotel on my own. So I'm the party girl, so everyone invites me, so I just show up after everything's been done. So I don't ever really do that. So thinking about those things, she created an experience where I could go to a travel agency, they do a survey, and they pair me up with a small group to kind of arrange all those things for me, or whoever I go with, to make it very personalized and not as intimidating.
Okay, so moving from these particular prototypes, and everyone had something that they created and something that was created for them, we just want to zoom out for a moment to think about this process that you just went through. And I'll just open with the world's most general question. What did that feel like? What did you notice about what we just did?
The very first part of it, where we were asking questions, ties to the very first thing there, which is building relationships. And then even afterwards, when very briefly, our other two partners were able to share about each other, you know, I learned in just that brief experience, the first time I've known Johnny for over a year now, but his sharing of that, or his partner's sharing of Johnny, helped me learn more about it. So just building relationships.
It's open to interpretation, and you just go with it. Trust.
Building on that idea is, I heard the language being used in my group. There was no, and we've done this exercise with my staff, but you presented no idea, and no, but there was a lot of yes, and it would get kind of crazy, but like a little more outlandish, but it was still, and then some real stuff came out of it, but yes, and building on possibility rather than not practical.
Totally fundamental to that ideate phase, but actually permeating throughout, right? That yes and attitude is one of the fundamental mindsets.
And I could see it just energize people. Like John was talking about how, it's tired, we're all principals, we're all tired. And he was like jazz, but it was like the energy of people like going, yeah, and this.
Initially, it seemed like it was about building relationships because you're sharing information, but then you really, it went deeper into self-actualization because you start out with a very general, simple, rudimentary idea, but as you begin to talk about it, you're digging deeper into the inner recesses of your mind and your beliefs and values. So I thought that was really interesting.
It's such an unusual way to come up with an idea, because you're not starting with there's a problem and it needs to be solved. Let's get really creative about how we solve it. It starts with we're talking to each other, and then that makes me think of something, and then that makes me think of a problem, and then I have to solve that problem that I didn't even know was a problem 10 minutes ago. And so
now I got more problem.
And it's so weird as like a leader.
An opportunity.
Yeah. But as a leader, to not start with a problem, but to start with how can we just be creative and make something interesting here.
One of the things that I really thought that was interesting or thought-provoking is like at the very end that it was just me and my own idea. And then just me with these things up there that I really didn't like. Because I couldn't figure out to build what I clearly knew what I wanted to build. And then it was just about just sitting there and laughing with people and then looking at things and then stealing people's ideas and stealing some other people's things, and I built my thing. And so it was just really interesting how it was very much of a community, very collaborative. But at the end, I think we all are by ourselves when we have to make a decision. And there was something about that really resonated with me. You know, I had to make Sophie's Choice decisions every day. And it was just, they're hard to do on a daily basis, but this was an interesting situation where I was able to just sort of let go of the outcome and still make a decision.
What was it like for people to be, just since you brought up kind of the materials, right? We have a strong point of view about why it's important to do what we call low resolution prototypes. What was that like for people to just make something in 7 minutes out of crappy materials that were right here?
It was terrifying. This is my weakness, really, and it was really scary. But then, like Alfonso said, when I started looking around, but then I felt guilty about stealing ideas. And I'm like, whatever, we do that all the time as educators, right? Like we share ideas. So, yeah, it challenged me for sure.
Yeah, and I'm certain you are not alone. For some people, it's actually a moment, we call it build to think, right? Where suddenly the ideas actually start coming because your hands are in it, right? But for other people, it feels really scary, and then it can start to be liberating at another juncture. Why do you think we do it? Like, what is the benefit of creating something, really fast?
It's like limited resources. I feel like everybody took what I wanted, so I'm going to be creative and put symbolism to this. This is going to mean this, and I'm going to use this. And so I was really pleased with my product, with the limited resources that they were there.
The other piece of why we really insist on doing fast prototypes with low resolution materials is that it also helps, and I'm curious if anybody found this, you get better feedback. When you create the beautiful PowerPoint deck or the great website or the 3-year program, and then you go to get feedback on it, there are 2 problems. One, you're really way past the point of getting feedback because you're very committed yourself. And also, your audience, your users, can see how much work you put into it, and they're not going to give you honest feedback. But if you show up with something like this, right, you're like, so I thought it could work like this, then they can be like, oh, no, what about this? And they can build on your ideas, and they can give you more honest feedback because they're not terrified that you just spent $1 million on it, and that the train has left the station. Right? So that's the other side. It actually works in both directions. It frees you, but it also frees your user to give you better feedback.